this rush. That was the rush that got you. Not. I want to make sure you've had time to really process and think. Okay, so today is when we talk about two different kinds of proofs. We're going to have flowchart proofs and paragraph proofs. You have been doing two column, and you should have been doing statements on the left, reasons on the right. Most of you are doing really good with that. Had a couple students who didn't label the top of their proofs. Just a reminder, I will count off for that. You have to number them. That's the other thing. A few people aren't numbering their statements and numbering their reasons, so make sure that you are doing that. So what my goal is for today is not that you can write a flowchart proof by yourself or that you can write a paragraph proof by yourself. What I want you to be able to do is notice the difference between the three types of proofs, because when you take the ACT Aspire, they may ask you to write a flowchart or a paragraph, or they may give you those kinds of proofs. And if you've never seen them before, then that's setting you up for failure. My goal today, though, is for you to be able to take these two kinds of proof and write a two-column proof from them. Okay, so basically the proof is going to be done for you, but it's going to be in a different format, and you've got to put it in two columns. That's our goal for today. There is a theorem or two in here that we're going to learn new today as well, so there'll be a couple things that aren't proofs but theorems. And then some problems kind of like on your homework you just had where maybe it's not asking you to do a proof, it's just asking you to use the theorem to solve for x. So you may have some problems like that on your homework tonight. Okay, so the second style of proof is called a flowchart proof. If you've ever seen a flowchart, just in life, a flowchart, it has usually arrows that kind of lead from one thing to the next thing to show you the flow of how things work. That's what a flowchart proof will do. It's probably the best kind of proof, to be honest. It's better than a two-column proof because it makes you show your reasoning. Whereas in a two-column proof, you just have all these statements listed, and it doesn't make you say which statement you used up here to get down here. But a flowchart proof will. It's going to make you put arrows, which show which things you've put together. In a flowchart proof, it uses boxes and arrows to show the structure. The justification for each step or reason is written below the box. So it's going to put the statements inside the box. I need to get that fixed. Statements inside the box, and then reasons will go underneath the box. And then it's going to use an arrow. That's going to tell you from this statement, this is the next statement that they were able to conclude. It may be that there's a couple statements that are put together to get a new statement. So then the arrows will come together and point in a box. So that's the part that's better about a flowchart proof, is it makes you connect the thoughts and show what came next instead of just listing all of these thoughts. Okay, before we actually look at different ones, we're going to look at a new theorem. This is called the common segments theorem. And again, you'll have some problems on your homework that ask you to just basically use this to solve. So it says given collinear points A, B, C, and D. What's that mean? What's collinear mean? Same line. So given 4 points that are on the same line, arranged as shown. So we have A, B, C, and D. If this line segment is split into 3 parts, but 2 of those parts are congruent. So A, B, and C, D are congruent. Then this common segments theorem says AC should be congruent to BD. Now see if that makes sense to you. I'll put some numbers up here. So if this is 5 and these are congruent, what does CD have to be? 5. So therefore, does it make sense that 5 plus BC has to be the same as 5 plus BC? So you ready with me? Okay, so this part should be the same as this part. Or in other words, if I say that BC is 10, what is AC going to be? What is BD going to be? 15. So if they share a common part, that's why it's called the common segments theorem. If they share a common part, and then you have 2 parts congruent, then 2 parts will be the same as the other 2 parts. So that's common segments theorem. Okay, if you'll look down here, do you guys see the flowchart proof on your notes? See how it is different than a paragraph proof. A two-column proof. It's not set up as statements and reasons. It just has all the statements inside the boxes, and all the reasons are underneath each box. But what I like about flowchart proofs is the arrows show you what the thought process was. So in this case, there were two different givens. They wrote those as two separate statements off by themselves because they were just two different things given. From this given, they were able to conclude this. From this given, they were able to conclude this. It took both of those statements to get the one here. And then from that statement, they were able to get their final statement. So it makes you connect the boxes. All I want you to be able to do is take that and write a two-column proof, which should be really easy because all the statements and reasons are there. The only thing you have to be careful about is the order in which you put them in. That's going to matter. Okay, so we're going to do that together. I'm going to do it over here on the board because it's kind of hard to see. So if you are watching the video, make sure you look at the filled-in proof in the notes. Okay, so statements and reasons. Did I give you guys the statement reason box? Okay, so look over there to the right in your notes. It should already be set up for you. Number one. What's the first thing that we would write down based on this flowchart proof? Okay, so I heard two different things. Angle 2 and 3 are, and then 1's congruent to 3. Will it matter which one of these I write down first? No, it does not matter. They're both given. So write one of them down first. It doesn't matter where you start. I'm going to start on the left over here. So angle 2 and angle 3 are complementary. Don't forget that we do not abbreviate. So even if the book does, you write it out. And what's the reason? Given. Okay, where should we go next? Down the arrow. So I would say go down, and what can we conclude from this given? Very good. And the reason? Definition of complementary angles. And I'm okay if you just put definition of complementary, but you can include the angles as well. Is everybody following that? It's just listed underneath. We're just rewriting it, but putting it in order. Could I have went over to this given first as my second statement? I could have. I think it'll be easier, and I think it'll help you as you're trying to master proofs if you don't. I think it'll be easier if you give your given and then you write down what did they conclude from that. It just helps you start to see more and more how what you're given leads you to the next thought process. Okay? Where do we have to go after number 2 though now? To the other given, because we can't go to the right until everything up above is listed in our proof. So we have to go over to the other given, so we'll write angle 1 is congruent to angle 3, and that will be given. Where do we go from there? Down the arrow, good, Lorena, so that's what he was getting to there, right? So then we're going to put measure of angle 1 equals the measure of angle 3, and the reason is? Definition of what? Of congruent angles. We're talking about angles here, so it should be angles here, or you can just put definition of congruent. And again, when you're writing these, my hope is not that you're just quickly writing them down, but that you're following and seeing were they given, what did they conclude, just to help reinforce what we're doing for proofs to help you for the test. So that's the main reason I do this section every year, is so that you see the difference, but then it also gives you another day to process how to work proofs. Okay, from there, where do we go? Down the arrow again, so that's going to lead us to the one that says substitution. So measure of angle 2 plus measure of angle 1 equals 90 degrees. And they put and then you have to finish it out. So substitution, what? Property of equality. And then your very last statement would be the one at the bottom, going down. which is that angles 2 and angle 1 are complementary. And what's the reason for your last statement? Definition of complementary angles. Questions on how to take a flowchart proof and write a 2-column proof? Hands up if you feel like that's pretty easy. Okay, so again, my advice is reason through what they're doing though as you're writing these down, because that's going to help you study for your test. Just reasoning through, understanding why they did what they did. All right, so if you're watching the video, this is what we wrote down and filled in our proof. Oops, okay, so on this one, instead of taking the time to go through writing it all out again, because that takes a little time, I would rather get you time for your homework. Let's just go through and label these S1 for statement 1, R1 for reason 1, and then that's how we would have listed them in our 2-column proof. Is that okay? So where would we start here? The given. So over here, this would be statement 1, this would be reason 1. Is that making sense what I'm saying? Everybody cool with that? Anybody not cool with what we're doing? Yeah? Question? Okay, so that means if I were writing this in 2 columns just to save time, statement 1 would be the RS equals UV, ST equals S equals TU, and then reason 1 would be given. So I'm just trying to save us time. Is it okay if we don't write it all out? Okay. All right. Where would we go from here? Down. So this would be statement 2, and this would be reason 2. Okay, where would we go from there? Very good. Up to the top, because we can't go to the right until we have this listed in our proof. So this would be statement 3, reason 3, and then we would go where? Down to RT equals PV, so this would be statement 4 and reason 4. And then our last statement would go to the right, statement 5, reason 5. Any questions on how to take a flow chart, put it as a 2-column? Okay, I'm going to assume you're good with that. We're going to move on to paragraph proofs. So again, if you're watching the video, this is how it would fill in. Okay, paragraph proof. So on your vocab test, you're going to have 3 different proofs. One of them is going to be your 2-column, which is the type of proof that puts statements on the left, reasons on the right. Then you'll have a flow chart, which uses boxes and arrows to connect your statements and reasons. And then you have the paragraph, which is a type of proof that presents the steps of the proof and their matching reasons as sentences in a paragraph. These are my least favorite types of proofs because I have to read these long paragraphs. And I'm a math teacher, not an English teacher. So even though I hold you accountable to spelling and punctuation and capitalization, those are tiny things. Grading paragraphs is not what I would consider fun. So don't love paragraph proofs, but I do want you to know what those look like and be able to work with them. So again, we're going to take a paragraph proof. We're going to write a 2-column proof from it. That's our goal. Before we get there, a couple more theorems today. The first one here we already learned. We did this back in chapter 1. I had you add it to your notes. It's the vertical angle theorem. Vertical angle theorem just simply says vertical angles are congruent. So in a proof, if you have somewhere listed in your proof a statement that says A and B are vertical angles, then your next statement could be angle A is congruent to angle B, and this would be your reason. Are we good with that? Remember, vertical angles are the angles that are across from each other when 2 lines intersect. So those would be our vertical angles there or here. The next one, unfortunately, doesn't have a name. So what that means is if you use that theorem in a proof, you're going to have to basically write out in your own words or in this exact writing, one way or the other, what this theorem says as your reason. It doesn't have a name. So it says if 2 congruent angles are supplementary, think about that, 2 congruent angles are supplementary. What would have to be the measure of each angle if they're congruent and supplementary? 90. This is going to say, instead of saying that they're 90, you can say that they are right angles. So if two congruent angles are supplementary, so in a proof, if you have that 1 and 2 are congruent, and then somewhere else you have that 1 and 2 are also supplementary. If they're congruent and supplementary, you can go right to they are right angles. You can use this little way of abbreviating if you want to write it in a proof. Congruent angles supplementary implies right angles. Or you can just write out in words. Two congruent angles that are also supplementary must be right angles. Okay, but you're going to have to somehow memorize that and write that down if you use it as a reason. Any questions there? Okay. So this is an example of a paragraph proof, and I think this is our last example. Is that correct? Okay, so I told you today would be really short. I want to give you lots of time to start studying. So you'll work on your homework today in class. You'll get that finished, I hope, before you leave class so that then you have some time to start working on review. All right, use the given paragraph proof to write a two-column proof. So they're going to give you the given and the proof. They're giving you the entire paragraph. You're going to have to separate it into two columns. Paragraph proofs are a little harder to write into two columns just because, first of all, in sentences, sometimes they'll leave out certain words and you'll have to add those back in. And because it's lots of wording, you've got to pick out the statement, pick out the reason. Okay? If you'll go sentence by sentence, it will help. And again, I'm going to do it over here on the board. So we're going to, I think I gave you a chart again. Awesome. So you're going to read the very first sentence and pick out the statement and the reason. It is given that angle 1 plus angle 2 is equal to angle 4. So what is our first statement? Very good. So measure of angle 1 plus measure of angle 2 equals measure of angle 4. What's the reason given? So that's pretty easy, right? Keep going. Angle 3 and 4 are supplementary by the linear pair theorem. So what would we write as our statement number 2? So angle 3 and angle 4 are supplementary. And that's how we would write it, word for word, just like it says. And what would be our reason for that? Linear pair theorem. So again, you're just picking it out from the sentence. Now, how did they know that angles 3 and 4 were a linear pair? Okay, the picture. And technically, what they should have written, which they did not, is that angle 3 and angle 4 are a linear pair before they said they were supplementary. They looked at the picture, they saw they were supplementary. In a paragraph proof, it's a little less formal than a two-column or a flowchart. So oftentimes they leave things out in a paragraph proof that you should list if it were two-column or flowchart. So if you were writing a proof for me for the test, I would expect you to put angle 3 and angle 4 are a linear pair, and I would expect you to put definition of a linear pair as your reason. A linear pair definition says two angles that have a common vertex and a common side and form a straight line are a linear pair. So we would have to have that up here in our proof first. Everybody with me? And then if they're a linear pair, we know they're supplementary by the linear pair theorem. Okay, keep going. So it says, so measure of angle 3 plus measure of angle 4 is equal to 180 by definition. What do I put here for number 3? Measure of angle 3 plus measure of angle 4 is equal to 180. Now here again is where sometimes they leave out some words. What is my reason? Definition of supplementary. They say by definition because previously they had used the word supplementary in their paragraph. So they're just saying by definition of the word previously. You have to be able to read that and understand that they meant the definition of supplementary. Okay, you cannot just put definition down. All right, and then lastly, it says, so by substitution, measure of angle 3 plus measure of angle 1 plus measure of angle 2 equals 180. So all of that should be our statement, right? Measure of angle 3 plus measure of angle 1 plus measure of angle 2 should equal 180. And what's our reason? Substitution what? Very good. Make sure you're putting all of the parts. Substitution, property of equality. Questions today? Again, agree, pretty easy. Not too hard. The hard part is writing your whole proof by yourself. I'm hoping that by translating these, that's going to help reinforce some of those. This is what I know. This is why I know it for the test. So here is your homework. I would love for you to turn it in before you leave so that you can go home with only the review to be working on. And then remember that on Wednesday, if you've already passed your proficiency, you get an extra 30 minutes to work on the review. If you haven't, you'll still have about 20 or 30 minutes to work on the review. This also gives you some time between now and Wednesday to study for your vocab and to study for your proficiency test if you get your homework done today, which is also very important. If you get your homework finished, you can go ahead and turn it in today, but it's still not due until next class period if you don't. Please let me know if I